Ben Shapiro discusses the major political developments surrounding Joe Biden's decision to drop out of the 2024 presidential race and Kamala Harris becoming the presumptive Democratic nominee. He notes that Biden is set to give a major address from the Oval Office, which Shapiro characterized as a proof of life event. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is visiting Washington, D.C., and Kamala Harris is ramping up her campaign efforts. Shapiro argues that Democrats are hoping voters will forget about Biden's presidency and are now focusing all attention on Harris. He criticizes the media for covering Harris extensively and positively, calling their coverage syrupy and describing Harris as the fun aunt. However, he contends that Biden is still the president and his policies have made the world less safe, with ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine, as well as tensions with China over Taiwan. He also points to economic issues like inflation and a stagnating economy. Shapiro discusses comments from Democratic Senator Chris Coons, who dismissed allegations of a cover-up regarding Biden's health and fitness for office. Coons argued that such claims are irrelevant now that the race has changed to Harris versus Trump. Shapiro agrees that by November, voters may not be focused on the circumstances of Biden's exit, which is why Democrats made this change now. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is shown attempting to generate enthusiasm for Harris, claiming there was grassroots support for her candidacy. Shapiro calls this a lie, arguing that Harris was appointed by Democratic Party elites to replace Biden in order to keep his campaign war chest intact. He criticizes the narrative that Harris earned the nomination, pointing out that she didn't campaign or participate in primaries. Shapiro analyzes Harris's first campaign rally in Wisconsin, where she attempted to frame the election as a choice between the future and the past. He criticizes her rhetoric as cliché and irritating, predicting that her true personality will emerge over the course of the campaign. Harris portrayed Trump as representing chaos, fear, and hate, while positioning herself as standing for freedom, compassion, and the rule of law. Shapiro argues that Harris is actually far to the left of Biden politically and warns that her presidency would mean more inflationary policies, more spending, and a foreign policy that sides more with America's adversaries. He cites a Wall Street Journal article suggesting Harris would push for a shift in U.S. policy toward Israel and put more pressure on the country regarding the situation in Gaza. Shapiro discusses the challenges Republicans face in running against Harris instead of Biden. He notes that while Harris is currently unpopular, many Americans don't know much about her record. Republicans will need to introduce her to voters and run a disciplined campaign without making mistakes. He suggests that Trump's choice of J.D. Vance as a running mate may not be ideal for competing against Harris. Trump's campaign acknowledges that Harris will likely see a polling bump in the short term, but argues that the fundamentals of the race remain unchanged. Shapiro agrees with this analysis, but warns that even if Harris is competitive nationally, state-by-state polling still favors Trump in the Electoral College. Shapiro predicts that Democrats will accuse anyone who opposes Harris of being sexist and racist, calling this their favorite line of defense. He discusses a clip from MSNBC's Morning Joe, where hosts criticized a Republican congressman for referring to Harris as a DEI hire, calling such comments offensive and racist. Shapiro argues that it's not racist to point out that Biden chose Harris in part because of her race and gender, as Biden himself had stated this was a factor. However, he advises Republicans to avoid mentioning Harris's identity or personal history, as Democrats are waiting to pounce on any such comments as evidence of sexism or racism. Shapiro speculates on who Harris might choose as her running mate. He discusses several possibilities, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Shapiro suggests that Mark Kelly from Arizona is currently the frontrunner for the VP nod. Shapiro discusses Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to Washington, D.C., including his scheduled speech to a joint session of Congress. He notes that many Democrats, including Vice President Harris, are planning to skip the speech, which Shapiro attributes to the Democratic base's dislike of Israel. He argues that Democrats apply their theory of intersectional politics to the Middle East, viewing Israel as an oppressor and Palestinians as oppressed. Shapiro criticizes pro-Palestinian protesters who gathered outside Netanyahu's hotel, calling for his arrest. He also mentions that some protesters managed to enter the Capitol building, which Shapiro sarcastically notes is apparently not a threat to democracy when done by left-wing groups. Throughout the podcast, Shapiro emphasizes the significant shift in the political landscape caused by Biden's exit and Harris's ascension as the presumptive Democratic nominee. He argues that while this change has made the race more competitive, Harris's far-left policies and the circumstances of her nomination present vulnerabilities that Republicans can exploit. However, he warns that Republicans must run a disciplined campaign and avoid falling into traps set by Democrats regarding identity politics. Shapiro also touches on broader issues, including the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Ukraine, tensions with China, and domestic economic challenges. He criticizes the media and Democratic politicians for what he sees as dishonest narratives surrounding Biden's exit and Harris's candidacy.